Hello, everyone. My name's Rach. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic and addict. And welcome to this Infinite Power and Love book study. We are in There Is a Solution. So, welcome to those that are new that we haven't seen on this study before. Um, just as a little overview, this chapter, There Is a Solution. What a beautiful promise that we have. There is a solution. And what they actually do in this chapter, along with telling us about the solution, which we covered last week, they're just drumming it into our heads about alcoholism and what comes along with that, the body and the mind. And they're really trying to help us understand what this illness is. And last week, hello everyone, welcome to everyone that's just joined. We kicked off last week right on the bottom of page 25. So two incredibly powerful pages. Page 24, where it describes that we have lost control. Most at a certain point of the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state when the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. And then that powerful paragraph in italic, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. So hammering home that step one, that powerlessness and unmanageability. And, on page 25, it tells us what our solution actually is. It says that the great fact, so halfway down the page on page 25, it says the great fact, that's evidence, proof, is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced, love that word, it means just begun, started, begun, to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. So that, in a way, is the solution, that we can follow these 12 steps. And, it says just before that bit that I read on page 25, it talks about being rocketed into a fourth dimension and finding heaven on earth. That is what is on offer if I'm willing to put the work in. The other massively powerful bit, which I find it so simplified, is at the bottom of page 25, which we covered last week, is just those two options. It says, if you were as seriously alcoholic as we were, and I've got a question mark in there, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. Well, if you're here with us and you have ever tried middle of the road solution, half-assing your program, having one foot in and one foot out, maybe not giving it everything you've got, being on the fence slightly, you'll know what that feels like. But it says there is no middle of the road solution. And then it says, there are two alternatives. One is to go on till the bitter end. Now, I was thinking about, this is obviously talking about just carrying on into insanity and death. But I was thinking about, one was to go until the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. Has anybody ever been like trapped in the bondage of self in their recovery, in their sobriety, feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm blotting out I'm blotting out the consciousness of my reality. My reality is that I actually have got heaven on earth, but when I'm in self, I can be totally um, wrapped up in the bondage, and it's just really, really unpleasant. And the other is to accept spiritual help. So what we pointed out last week is that this is the first time it does a reference to the spiritual experience. So where the little asterisk is next to effective spiritual experience, down at the bottom, it says fully explained appendix 2. And in my book, I've got first time. So I just always try to explain it quite fully, just in case there is somebody that's newer into the program. I always remember where appendix 2 is in the book, because the numbers are in a row, 5, 6, 7. But this is the first time it's mentioned. So we'll just go over to page 567 and we'll read spiritual experience together. So appendix 2, spiritual experience. And even just thinking about the word spiritual, it means otherworldly, right? It means not the material world. It means something beyond the material. So, and an experience is something to be felt, something you can't buy it. You have to experience it. You have to feel it. You have to sense it. And when you think about what we've got here, step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol or drugs, that our lives had become unmanageable. And step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening. As the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So the problem is in step 1. And then as we work through the steps, we're promised this spiritual awakening, as long as I do all of the other steps fully to the best of my ability. So we'll just read spiritual experience together. And just something else I just want to add, like what I find really exciting about recovery is that it's limitless. This opportunity for spiritual experiences are endless. There are people 5, 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 years in who are still having these incredible spiritual experiences. So wherever you are at now, whether you're a few days in or a few years or a few decades in, we can always commence to have more experiences. It's beautiful. So the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. I've squiggly underlined awake in awakening, because it's almost like, the bit we just read on page 25, where blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation. This is what I was doing in my alcoholism and my addiction. I was blotting out the consciousness. With this awakening, I'm actually a spiritual, soulful being. I've just been putting myself to sleep consciously. So I love the idea of like waking up to the reality and beauty of this life as it can be experienced when I am awake. So they are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading, so that to me sounds like an instruction. I've squiggly underlined it. I've got another book study on a Thursday and we color code stuff, and I would put that as an instruction, careful reading. I mean, you're on this book study on a Friday night, so I know you're the type of people who like carefully reading and studying the book, so you're my kind of people. But some people don't. You do here, and it says read this book 4 times in the big book, and it's just like a very basic, simple instruction: read this book, read this book. So it shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself in many different forms. So if anybody hasn't already, just Googled Joe and Charlie spiritual experience. I would highly, highly recommend it. They're just so fantastic the way they talk you through the book. And so in here, this personality change in my book is circled because this whole appendix 2 is about change. Personality change means my whole character is going to change. So it's manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, there it is again, another big word for big change, or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. So I've circled again personality changes and upheavals. That's another word for change. But it says here, doesn't it? Sudden and spectacular upheavals. Last week, when we spoke about being rocketed into the fourth dimension, that's on offer, but that's not everybody's experience, you know. So it's saying many readers got the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. So that's just a fancy word of saying error. It's a mistake. It's wrong. And that, you know, everybody's experience can be really different. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes. So there's another word. You know, these words are big as well, aren't they? That spectacular upheavals, revolutionary changes are described. I've done some little cross references. I know some people in this book study like them, so I hope you can bear with me while I just refer back to different places. So on page 14, Bill Wilson talks to us about his sudden change, his revolutionary change, where it's the second paragraph down on page 14. And he says, these were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. So there's one reference to, and that's a big one because it's Bill Wilson talking about his experience of a spiritual experience. We've also got, which we haven't got to yet, but I did a little cross reference to page 27. And it's just where Roland Hazard is speaking to Carl Jung. And they're on page 27, in the middle of the page, it says, to me, these occurrences, here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So there's another reference to a sudden and spectacular upheaval. And then the other two that I thought of was back in the doctor's opinion. So on the second to last page of the doctor's opinion, so it's XXXI, the second to last page on the doctor's opinion. He talks about seeing Hank Parkhurst. So on that first paragraph, he talks about, you know, this man who was being treated, he'd partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. And then he couldn't bring himself to remember this guy. because he got well. And Fitzmayo is the next story on the doctor's opinion. And again, this guy was absolutely hopeless, and he was in a deserted barn, but then he became a fine specimen of manhood. So they've referenced all of these people who have had these sudden spiritual awakenings and just become okay. And a lot of people who were getting this book were just like, well, when am I going to have one of these? What if I don't have it? Am I not going to get well? And that's why this was added in. So back to page 567. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. So I've circled vast change. I've also circled overwhelming, because that's a bit of a change as well. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, there's another word for change, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. And there is that book, Varieties of Religious Experience, which I do have. I don't know if anybody else has it or has read it. It is so dense. It's really hard to read. We've got a fellow who I'm going to try and twist her arm and get her to one day take me through that book and open it up if anybody's interested. I'll let you know when that happens. I did a little cross-reference here to page 84. If you wanted to add that in at the end of the step 9 promises, it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. So I added that in because it said they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference. Again, that sounds like change, aware of the difference long before he is himself. And you might be able to relate to that over a short period of time or a long period of time. You might not feel like you can see any change or in yourself, but those around you can, and sometimes you can. Sometimes you can really notice. You're like, whoa, did I just not swear at that person, or whatever your thing is. It is amazing, but the change does happen. It's literally magic. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. I've put a question mark in there. Can you relate to that? Profound means deep, extreme, a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That a change, I've circled change as well, could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Well, how many of us have tried our hardest to change ourselves, to do the impossible, to stop drinking or using, and to sort ourselves out? And it says, doesn't it, where we'd love to be more moral, more ethical, but we can't. We don't have the power. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been, what often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. I mean, again, I don't know if you can relate to that, but my experience was I was sort of trying harder and harder year after year to control and enjoy my drinking and using, but it's progressive. It was actually getting worse and worse and worse. I lost control. The self-discipline, my willpower was not enough. So, with few exceptions, our members find that this bit is beautiful. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power, capital P, greater than themselves. Well, I love that bit because it to tap something, it means to draw supply from. So all of these people, all of these members, all of our fellows in recovery are saying the same thing, that they've tapped an unsuspected inner resource. Resource means stock or supply. I did a little cross reference there to page 55 next to inner, because on page 55 in We Agnostics, it says that deep down within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. I'll just go to it so I don't paraphrase any of and miss it. Sometimes we had to search diligently. Let's see. Oh, fearlessly. So, oh yeah, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. Beautiful. So, sorry, let's go back to that. So I love that they keep on reiterating, don't they, about this power greater than themselves, that it is within us, that we can tap into it. And you know, I don't know about you guys, but it's a really comforting feeling being tapped in. It's a really uncomfortable, horrible feeling when you're shut off, right, from the sunlight of the spirit and just wrapped up in self and angry, confused, just sort of lost. It's a feeling of feeling lost, you know, but good to know that this inner resource is always there. We've got the directions, and everyone is saying the same thing, that that we can tap into it, and that it comes to us in loads of different ways. So most of us think this awareness, and I've like squiggly underlined aware, that means conscious, doesn't it? So this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. So that's really reassuring as well. It means just having an awareness of this power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. And, you know, throughout the book, it tells us it's just about being willing. Am I willing to see it? Am I willing to pray? Obviously, prayer and meditation is in step 11, and we're kind of working in There Is a Solution. We're still around step 1. But they keep on reminding us about this power and about how we can tap into it. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Again, if you think about the word consciousness, it's like being awake. I'm suddenly awake to this spiritual realm that's always been there, but I've been shut off because I've been synthetically making myself numb. I've been disconnecting from this power, actively disconnecting. So most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic, so I've double underlined any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. That's a promise. It's factual. They can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. So we're not quite at the chapter, We Agnostics. You know, we're not there yet, but it's a good question, I think, to ask ourselves, like, where am I still prejudiced? Where am I still agnostic? Where am I still without knowledge? Where am I still being judgmental about things that I have no experience with? How can I open my mind a little bit more to these things that I don't yet understand? You know that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's like, how ready am I to show up and go, okay, a bit of humility, I don't know. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. And belligerent means hostile and aggressive. So they're not even just saying denial, they're saying hostile and aggressive denial. Now, if you think about the principles around step one, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and drugs, that our lives had become unmanageable. That's a level of honesty. I have to smash the delusion and the denial in that step. So we find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. So open-mindedness, yeah. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. So I remember hearing somebody say, how can I get sober, and how can I stay sober? So and then the H. So they wrote it out, HOW. It's quite good and easy to remember. So the H is for honesty, the O is for open-mindedness, and the W is for willingness. And I thought, oh yeah, that's brilliant. That's a really good way of remembering that. And then a year or so later, somebody said, yeah, that's step 1, 2, and 3. Honesty for step 1. I need to admit to myself that I am alcoholic, that my life has become unmanageable. Hey, I just did a thumbs up automatically. Open-mindedness is step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And willingness is, am I willing, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood it, him, whatever. But actually, in this bit, it says who. So it's kind of squiffed the the acronym up a little bit, but I think it's in the book somewhere else, the how. That's quite a nice way to help newcomers remember the 3 essential things, because it says here as well, but these are indispensable, which means absolutely necessary: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. I mean, everlasting ignorance. Who wants to be in everlasting ignorance? When you say it like that, it's like, it's so arrogant, isn't it? It seems so uninviting, and just, yeah. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. So contempt means beneath consideration. So imagine that, my little head, my little brain that has no experience with God or a power greater than myself, somebody who has actively and unconsciously burned my life to the ground, pushed all my family away, like nearly killed themselves slowly and painfully, I'm going to go, nah, that's beneath my consideration, that option. I'm better than that. I know better than that, with no experience of it. It's the insanity of my illness. Contempt prior to investigation. I remember hearing in my early days, in meetings, just try it, just try this program. And if you don't like it, all of the pubs and the drug dealers are still going to be out there when, if you want your misery back, it will all still be there waiting for you afterwards. So contempt prior to investigation, just try it. And it says Herbert Spencer, but this was a boo-boo because apparently William Paley wrote this and it was misquoted. So I don't know why it's still in there like that, but never mind. So the spiritual experience, they just wanted people to know that it comes to people in different ways. Your friends and family may notice the change in you before you notice it yourself. Sometimes, what years and years of trying self-discipline can be absolutely like blown out the water in a couple of months. But please keep those three indispensable things of willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. So we'll go back to the bottom of page 25, where we left off last week. We did, the two options, and that's very clear cut, isn't it? One option is to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other, beautiful, short, sweet, simple, humble, accept spiritual help. Why wouldn't we jump at the chance? Why wouldn't I be biting somebody's hand off for that? Why do I get so resistant and so ingrained in my old ways of doing things when it clearly doesn't work? So it says this, so we're on to page 26. This we did because we honestly wanted to. I've put a big question mark after that. And I always ask sponsees, I'm like, do you honestly want to? Do you want to accept spiritual help? Do you want to be rocketed into the fourth dimension? Do you want what we have? And we're willing to make the effort? And then I've got two question marks. And I always ask sponsees, I'm like, are you willing to make the effort? And you know what? Sometimes I have to ask myself, am I still willing to make the effort? Recently I've been in a bit of a funk. I've been in a bit of fear and a bit of resentment. And it's like, this is a constant opportunity, this program, isn't it? To go back into what works, what actually works. Am I still willing to make the effort? So a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. And they're talking about Roland Hazard here. So very wealthy man who, well, we'll explain it as we go through. So for years, he floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Jung. Oh, I just added Carl in there, sorry. It's Carl with a C. Carl Jung, who prescribed for him. So Roland Hazard was a member of the Oxford group, and he was, a friend of Bill Wilson, very, very wealthy man. And he was so wealthy that he was able to go and live with Dr. Carl Jung, who is like an amazing psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, a disciple of Freud. So that just kind of shows just how wealthy and high class this guy was. But he was the real deal. He was a real alcoholic. So though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. So he lived with Dr. Jung for a year, finished his treatment with unusual confidence, remembering he'd floundered from one sanitarium to another. He'd researched it. I think somebody in here might know more than me. It was a bit of a fluke. It was a touch. He was meant to go somewhere else, and he ended up with Carl Jung. And Freud and Adler, which was another disciple of Carl Jung, they were more along the lines of therapy is going to help. Therapy and medication is going to help. But Dr. Carl Jung actually believed in the spiritual awakening and a psychic change and a spiritual experience. So it was so beautifully the God incidences around us all being here today, us all literally being here on this meeting today and in the fellowship and having access to this stuff. So here we go. His physical and mental conditions. There's that mind and body again. So I've squiggly underlined that. Physical and mental condition were unusually good. Remember back in Bill's story when he talks about his body and mind being marvelous mechanisms, how quickly we can bounce back, you know. But alcoholism is an illness of my mind. It's my unmanageability. It's my delusion about the fact that I can still control and enjoy my drinking or using. That's the condition. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Question mark. How horrific is this illness that so many of us, the cunning, baffling, powerful bit of this illness is that our bodies and minds bounce back and we think, yeah, we're okay, everything's fine, we feel great. And it's not the truth. I'm still an alcoholic. So again, I always like to draw out the threads of the reoccurring threads that go through this book. And self-knowledge comes up quite a lot. So I just did a couple of references. Fred's story on page 40 and Jim's story on page 35 talk about these two men, you know, who thought that self-knowledge was enough. Yeah, I know about alcoholism. You've told me what my condition is. I get it, but I'm fine. And it tells us again and again and again in this book that self-knowledge is just not enough. I can know this book, I can know the steps, I can know the page numbers, I can understand, you know, how it works, but unless I physically, mentally, unless I have an experience with it and take action, it's all going to be for nothing. So nevertheless, here we go, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So again, it's so confusing, isn't it? It says in the book, you know, they are a baffled lot. We can't understand why, but it is the illness of alcoholism. So he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control, question mark. But this is the problem, self-control. You know, we just read on page 24, it says he has lost control. It says at a certain time of, at a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no point, no avail, no benefit. We have it complete, and on page 22, which we read a week ago, I hope I'm not going too quick with the page references. Always let me know. On page 22, on the second to last paragraph, it says, we are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. Well, that's the invisible line, isn't it? It means I don't understand why and how and when this thing happened, but it's happened. So I'm back on page 26 now. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. Question mark. Is that your experience? Yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? Well, he's alcoholic. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. There's that word again. Hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. Step one. You know, I need to get to that place of hopelessness before I can be brought to a place of hope. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion, because he had prescribed for Roland Hazard. He'd done everything he could. He'd let him live with him for a whole year, and he was just like, you know, you are utterly hopeless. But this man still lives, and he is a free man. I love that word, free. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster. Oh, here we go. Provided, that's a warning, provided he remains willing. There's that word. Willing means like eager, keen, ready, prepared, willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. So in my original big book, I've got the principles there. I've got the 12 steps. Am I willing to maintain these simple attitude and principles and 12 steps? Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Uh-oh, question mark. Have you ever tried to do without spiritual help? How does it work out? I've only ever heard, you know, I've only ever heard people be in pain, the real alcoholic, without this program, basically. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind. Oh, there's that thinking problem again, the mind of a chronic alcoholic. So chronic means I'm going to have this mind for the rest of my life. Remember, the body and mind is the problem. So I've got this mind that tells me I'm not ill. I've got a mind that tells me I can still control and enjoy my drinking at some point, unless I maintain this spiritual way of life. And I've got a body that sets off this phenomenon of craving once I start. So you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover. And again, I mean, it's a good question to ask ourselves. Do you know any real alcoholic or addict that can stop on their own power? I don't actually know anyone that has done it or can do it. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind, there it is again, that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. So that state of mind being that utter powerlessness and unmanageability, going back to the very thing that's killing me, going back over and over again for years, until I was beaten into a sense of reasonableness, until I had lost all hope. That was the only time I came into recovery. So our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is." Okay, so he was utterly hopeless, right? He's gone to this amazing top dog psychoanalyst, Dr. Carl Jung, disciple of Freud, lived with him for a year, been medicated and done all this therapy, thought he was great. And the doctor's saying, no, I've never seen anyone with your state of mind recover, because he picked up as soon as he left. So he must have been really hopeless then. And he says, yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. So those three words come up twice on this page, but again, it's one of those threads that go through the book again and again and again. And that word vital is so important because it's essential. I can't do without it. Vital comes from the word vitalis, which means life-giving. It's the opposite of grave, isn't it? Vitality, vital, spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. So they're unexplained. They are you can't you can see the you can see the effects of them, but you can't explain how they've happened. Now, I absolutely love this next bit, right? And I'll do this little analogy for it. So they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Like, this bit right here blows my mind. They're talking about these spiritual experiences. And one of my sponsees, right, she's a neuroscientist, and we were sitting there doing step work, and she went, you know, the tectonic plates on the Earth's core? And I'm like, no, who does? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what? And she was basically saying that these tectonic plates, if they shift even a tiny bit, you wouldn't be able to see it, obviously, with the naked eye. You'd need like these massive, amazing telescopes. What would happen on the surface of the Earth is that a tsunami would happen, or an earthquake would happen. There a massive crack in the Earth's surface. Now, when I think about this, they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. You know, when you're having one of these, you know, on page 14, I always refer to page 14 because it says simple but not easy. A price has to be paid. It means the destruction of self-centeredness. And I think about the discomfort of this growth in recovery, how it feels like huge emotional rearrangements and displacements. It's not easy, it's not comfortable. But what she was explaining to me is that when this tsunami has happened, or this earthquake, or a volcano has erupted, everything settles back down as God intended it to be. These shifts were essential, but they're very, very uncomfortable. And then where it says ideas, emotions, and attitudes, so this is my thinking, my ideas are my thinking, my emotions are my feeling, and my attitudes are my actions, my new ideas. So my thinking, my feelings, and my actions, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these people, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives, that's a really good word, isn't it? What if I'm really honest with myself, and I'm asking you to be honest with yourselves as well, what were our motives before coming into recovery? tells me what my problem is on page 62. Selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles. So before I came into recovery, my guiding forces, my ideas, emotions, and attitudes, and my old ideas were purely based on how can I get what I want? How can I get what I need? How can I make myself happy? And now it's saying that these are suddenly cast to one side and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. If that isn't magic, I don't know what is. This is the power of a spiritual experience, right? So I like the little analogy of this this thing happening in the core of me, which is shifting everything on the outside. So if ever you have a bit of a wobble and a bit of a, oh my God, recovery is so uncomfortable, I had all of these shifts and changes, this is a spiritual experience. This is essential. This is what has to happen. Otherwise, I don't change. I stay in that old formation. So I really love that bit of the book. So it says, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Okay, so this is the famous Carl Jung talking to Roland Hazard, and he's saying, you know, you're completely hopeless, and it's got the asterisks there again. So if you flick to the page before, it says, and this is the first time, it says fully explained appendix 2. And then on the next page, it says for amplification, see appendix 2. So they're trying to amplify how important it is for us to understand that, one, these spiritual awakenings are vital, but two, they're going to feel differently to everyone. They might come slowly, they might come quickly, you know, but it's guaranteed that we're going to have them if we do this thing fearlessly and thoroughly. So upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. However, this hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So there's that 3 words again, vital spiritual experience. And I haven't got the cross references in this book, but I know it says it a few times. I can't think off the top of my head where it says, you know, faith without works is dead. So even Roland Hazard is saying, great, I'm a good church member, but I can be a good church member and have a faith and have a religion, but for my alcoholic problem, my alcoholic illness, I need a treatment, which is the 12 steps, accompanied with my faith in God. This just takes me, you know, to a connection. So we've got 5 more minutes. I'm not sure I'll get through the rest, but I'll try. Okay, here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which we have already told you made him a free man. Again, I like it when they say free, you know, free from alcoholism, free from addiction, free from the bondage of self when I'm walking in the sunlight of the spirit. When I get wrapped up in the bondage of self, it tells me directions of how to get out of it, you know, throughout the book. So we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. I can't remember who it is it? I think it's Mike D. I think I heard that one of these speakers actually gets their sponsees to watch somebody drowning, which sounds quite like torturous or whatever. But if you saw somebody with the desperation of a drowning person, you'd see that they are clinging to life, right? Why is it that when it comes to alcoholism and addiction, I can be like, do you know what? I don't know, because it says here, what seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. When people aren't grabbing onto this program, myself included, if I'm a bit resistant to something, this bit reminds me of, did I forget? Did I forget that I was slowly killing myself? Am I still as desperate to find God, to connect with this power as I was when I came in? Or am I getting a little bit complacent? Have I forgotten that without this 12-step program, I'm effectively, going back into the bondage of self, which could lead me into the unmanageability that could then lead me back to a drink or drug? Because the illness tells me that I'm okay. So a new life, isn't that lovely? A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. A design for living. My sponsor always gets me to highlight when it says design for living, a way of life. There's loads of references to this being, as soon as I can understand that this is a way of life for me now. It's not just something that I'm going to tick. I'm not just ticking off these boxes and like winging it and sort of just, half like middle of the roading it. Or I can, but it's not pleasant. It doesn't feel pleasant. Let me just check time. Oh, okay. Do you know what? I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to go over my time. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm just going to stop the recording.